time.
It has been a very long time. What are you up to these days?
I'm gainfully unemployed and loving it.
Oh yeah, that's nice, nice. I own my own business now, Charlie, so I'm kind of in the same boat.
I know. I drive by through the Malala area up 213 every once in a while. I think, well, Tony's around here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm tucked away, hidden back there. If you come down my lane, toss a white flag over your head. It's kind of a crazy little part of the world, actually. Christmas tree farms around us and ranchers.
Yeah, it's a different place.
That's a nice looking studio, Tony.
Well, thank you. It's I was just telling Doug and Marie are starting to, when we built this space, I kind of have these right to the left of me are these gigantic double hung windows, and they're kind of similar to what Smith Teamaker had in the original building. And I thought, this is going to be great. And now that I have them, the light is overwhelming at times. Like I need window treatments. I need to be able to soften it at times. And but other than that, we're loving it. Yeah.
Awesome. I love what you're doing on Instagram too. I think your voice is perfect.
Oh, well, appreciate it. It's the most stressful part of the whole business, to be honest, Todd. It's it's far enough, or it's the farthest out of my experience in a way, and I don't know. It's hard.
That's probably why it looks good and authentic, though.
Well, thank you. We try real hard.
It's working.
Hey, Todd, you'd think I planted you with those questions because that's a couple of my questions. So nicely done.
Yeah. Just have
Well, should we kick it off here? Why don't we dive in and taste some tea? I hear it's tea drinking weather in the Northwest with the rain. I won't rub in my blue skies of California for you, but I hear it's great weather to drink tea up there. So welcome to the Green Apron Alliance's Inspired Stories from the Kitchen series. My name is Doug Koob, and I'm the founder of Circle Alliances, which is a food and beverage consulting company based in San Mateo, California. I'm a founding board member of the Green Apron Alliance, and I lead business partnerships for the organization. The mission of the Green Apron Alliance is to create a space for Starbucks alumni to achieve their dreams and make the world a better place by amplifying a legacy of service, caring, and community. Our Inspired Stories series continues tonight and in the coming weeks with a twist. This time, we're from the kitchen. We've organized a 4-part Zoom webcast series over the next few months where we're featuring Starbucks alumni who are cooking up new businesses, brands, and products in their kitchens beyond the siren. Tonight's the second in that series. The purpose of the series is to connect Green Apron Alliance members from around the world with inspired stories and tasting experiences from Starbucks alumni and to discover what they've learned from building their food and beverage businesses after Starbucks. So before I introduce our special guest tonight, just a few logistics that I'd like to cover. This will be an interactive tasting experience. So for those of you that pre-ordered your tea products or have a cup of tea in front of you, get ready. Please have them ready to go in just a minute as we taste along with Tony. Marie Gill on the Green Apron Alliance Board of Directors is the Zoom controller tonight. She'll have everyone on mute for most of the event. However, the Zoom chat line is open as of right now, so feel free to submit any questions or comments via chat, and we'll be replying to those throughout the evening. Marie is also recording the event, and this will be available on the Green Apron Alliance platform in the next day or two. So our special guest tonight is Tony Tellin, founder of Tellin Company in Oregon City, Oregon. Tony's a great friend of mine. I've had the privilege of knowing him for a lot of years, and so this is just extra special for me to have Tony joining us for this second series for Inspired Stories from the Kitchen. Tony was a 10-year Starbucks partner from 1998 to 2008. He joined Starbucks with the acquisition of Tazo Tea, and he assisted Steve Smith, the founder of Tazo, with the integration of the brand, the products, and the company into the Starbucks organization and business. In 2009, Steve Smith founded his third tea company, Smith Teamaker, and Tony joined him to build that brand, business, and company in Portland along with Steve. In 2018, after 10 years at Smith Teamaker, Tony stepped away from Smith to create something of his own design. He built a tea kitchen out in the peaceful countryside near the end of the Oregon Trail, and he launched a Tellin Company driven by creativity, innovation, and honest-to-God artistry. He's crafting truly unique tea experiences around each harvest for the culinary-minded and for the modern consumer. Welcome, Tony Tellin, and thank you so very much for participating in this series. We're so happy to have you here with us tonight.
Well, thank you. No, it's a privilege and honor. Yeah.
So lots of questions here for you, Tony. And I think I'm going to mix it up a little bit here. I was going to start kind of like the history of Tony and tea, but I think I'll mix it up and I'll build on Todd's comments and questions because it's such a beautiful site we're all looking at there in your tea kitchen. And I had the privilege of joining you there a few months ago for a cup of tea, which was really amazing. And I know you built every single square inch of that tea kitchen in the Oregon woods, and it's just breathtaking and so peaceful. So talk about what we're looking at there. Maybe that'd be a great place to kind of describe the stage that you're sitting on right now. It's super cool.
Well, yeah, where to begin in a way. When I left Smith Tea Maker, I kind of went on my own walkabout in a way. I've always been a maker. I guess that sounds a little weird these days, but I've always been drawn to crafting things. I sew, I build furniture, I work with wood, plastic, metal, and anything and everything I can get my hands on. I've always been intrigued by how things were made, and I think that's why I latched on to Steve Smith originally in the first place. Was he was a fountain of knowledge about something I knew nothing of when I first met him. And when I left, I knew that I wanted to stay in the industry. I knew that I wanted to continue working with some of the farmers that have become kind of family. I wanted to work with, even chefs and restaurateurs. I enjoy the tea industry. I enjoy making tea. Beyond that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went out and I started talking to, I think I did what most people do. I talked to as many people as I could that had been down this path of starting something and tried to learn as much as I could. My mind is clearest. I am a creative type in the sense that my mind jumps all over the place and it's hard to kind of keep you focused on one thing at times. And usually when I have a hard time focusing on anything, I make something. While my hands are busy, my mind is a little more clear. And so I actually, started building a space because for one, I had pallet loads of shit from 20 years of traveling around the world and I needed somewhere to put it. For two, and my wife didn't want it in the house really. For two, I needed to clear my head and figure out what I wanted to do. So I started consulting in a way, kind of organically. I helped a few people in the trade with flavor optimization, some supply chain stuff. But I needed a place to cup teas. So we had it's like 1,800 square feet, roughly, give or take, kind of outbuilding on our property. It was 2 walls and a roof, basically. And so I just started tearing it apart one day. And honestly, Doug, next thing I know, 6 months later, it's what you see here in a way. We created a space that can be a tasting lab and a kind of a design area and a photography and videography kind of space. And then just over to the right of me here, behind a big, roll-up door is kind of that's the clean kitchen space where teas are manufactured. And it was kind of by design, I guess, functionality. It was a way to keep overhead low. What I really wanted to do was open a tea house. And I think that's still kind of my dream is to open a tea house, but it's a hard industry and a hard job, a hard go is operating a tea room. And I knew that I'd want product anyway. So I figured I'd start with the product in a kind of a small batch, really small, artisanal, homegrown kind of way. And then if it's in the cards, at some point open the tea house. So.
Awesome. That's great. I can remember when you left Smith and we were talking about you following your dreams and creating a Tellin, and I remember you talking about it being a family business. And I just love that the tea kitchen's there on your property next to your home. And I love the picture you just posted on Instagram of you having tea with your sons the other day. It was super cool. So Congrats
Yeah.
on your dream and incorporating your business into your family life.
Well, see, I didn't know of the pandemic back then. If I had known that, I probably would have put it offsite somewhere. It required, a little drive down the street, because we're all sick of each other at this point. But yeah, no, it actually, in all honesty, it's been really lovely. The boys actually helped, with as much as they could. If they were here right now, they'd tell you that they, pretty much built the space. But it has been a family kind of adventure from day one.
That's great. So jumping back and, to kind of the early days, I know you're not originally from the Portland, Oregon area. And I've heard you tell the story about landing in Portland, which is one of my favorite cities, a place I've had the opportunity to live twice, actually. So you had a great 10-year career with Tazo/Starbucks, because Tazo was bought by Starbucks. And you were there from 1998 to 2008. Can you talk about the roles that you had at Tazo and Starbucks during your time with the company and the teams that you were a part of with that organization? And maybe you could start, that's a big deal when a huge company acquires a smaller company.
Yeah.
So a lot of people on the screen here are probably really interested in hearing about that, the incorporation of Tazo into the Starbucks world, and what that was like. So can you talk a little bit about that, and walking into the support center in Seattle with 5,000 or 6,000 people, and
it was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. So, I think the thing that, I've actually learned more about my time at Starbucks in the last 3 years, just because I've gotten to an age where I'm actually thinking about some of the experiences I've had a little bit more deeply than just the surface level stuff. And, I was at the right place at the right time. I moved from Iowa to Portland in '98. I got off the train the day that the Beastie Boys released a new album, and I hopped in a Volvo wagon and we went up and bought the CD, and we drove around town listening to it pretty much all night. And the next morning I went to look for a job, and I actually just bumped into this cat that was working at Tazo at the time. And long story short, I started the next morning. And I've been in tea ever since. I started off in the warehouse, shipping and receiving, basic level stuff. I moved into production where I blended tea, and that's where I started working closely with Steve. He would jot down recipes in this completely, it reminded me of like, the fighter pilots back in the wars, right? He would, little notches and stuff like that instead of numbers and all this kind of stuff. And, he'd hand me these pieces of paper and say, go down and make 200 pounds of, I can't even think of the products now, but like a weight, right? And so I'd pull the ingredients, I'd mix the batch, and I'd have to pull a sample and take it up to the lab and have him taste. And that's, how we started kind of developing a rapport and a shorthand. And honestly, I think if he was a normal person that didn't overload his schedule in an amazing way every single day, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at today. But because he was so damn busy and was never on time to anything, and was constantly, he would say, put up the awake, and then an hour and a half later he'd show up and it was cold, and he'd say, can you put it up again? And then I'd go and put it up again, and then another 45 minutes later he'd come back, right? So I eventually, just because I didn't want to stay there until 11 o'clock every night, I eventually started guessing as to what he was going to do. And then it led to this conversation around, flavors and recipes and origins, and that was the start of a very long, relationship. And if he was still with us today, I'd be right by his side. He's he was an amazing person, But after the warehouse, I went into blending. After blending, I went into quality assurance. After quality assurance, I went into sourcing, procurement, and most of my kind of tea career at Tazo, I was in charge of buying green, black, white teas from around the world, and managing the formulation process that gave production the recipes they needed to keep products in stock.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I met, I was there on the day where Howard Schultz drove up in his limo and came in and talked to us all about, Starbucks and coffee and being part of this big company. Like I said, I was from Iowa, and there was not a single Starbucks in Iowa at the time. And I honestly didn't know too much about Starbucks. And kind of funny enough, the head blender at the time was really rather pissed off because he didn't want to work for this big kind of conglomerate, and he raised a fuss and he left, which is what opened up the job for me to come in. So in a way, it kind of helped, you know, my career advance in that respect. But hey, I had a really good time at Starbucks. I think everybody I worked with was really professional, and I worked with some of the best people out there. I learned a lot. The you know, the resources were amazing, and you know, I think we did a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, you know, you did some really cool stuff, and I just have to say, I was fortunate to be a part of that in the late 90s when I was living in Portland with Starbucks, and I was leading the food service team. And I may have told this story at a Green Apron event before, but that Tony and Steve at Tazo were a secret weapon after the acquisition, because all those accounts in the late 90s that wanted to go with a small little roaster in Portland, and big, huge accounts like the Marriott on the waterfront where you're trying to keep, whenever it got to the 11th hour and they were about to drop us and put our brewing equipment on the porch, we'd take them to Tazo. And I remember those days really vividly, and sipping the tea with yourself and with Steve. And Steve never had a PowerPoint in front of him. He just whipped out the tea and created his magic with you. And it was really special. I don't know that I've worked alongside two people that were so experiential with their products and their brands. And can you talk a little bit about that, Tony? Like, did it just come natural to you? Because you're just so at ease when you're making a cup of tea. And I've seen you innovate and do some really cool things on the fly. So is that a skill that working in the warehouse that you just evolved into, or how'd that happen?
I don't know. Like I said, I've always been kind of making things. You know what's interesting about Steve? Not a lot of people know that his father was a car salesman. And Steve was a salesman. I mean, he was a lot of things, right? He wore a lot of hats, and he was good at a lot of these things. And I think the friends of his, when we get together, sometimes we find ourselves in arguments on whether he was better at product design or sales or marketing or this and that. He was very good at all of these things. But the salesman in him, and that was something that was actually kind of frustrating, you know, working for him in a way, is, you know, part of his brilliance was that he had a lot of experience, literal experience, trying to sell just about everything. He would, it was hard to come up with an idea that he hadn't tried already. It was hard to, you know, you'd have a conversation about something. Oh, these strainers are kind of nice. They're affordable. They fit the teapot. I had 10,000 of those back in 1979. I drove up and down the West Coast selling them out of a VW bus, right? Like he had tried so many different things, but being on the road most of the time, being at the trade shows, and constantly talking to people about his product made him really good at it. And I think that's where his theater presence kind of came out of. It came out of just thousands and thousands of these conversations. You know, he once said at Smith Tea Maker, you know, that it was hard for him at this point to remember all the times people said no, you know, and I think that most of his experience came from that perspective. I was a drama major. I've always been in theater. I've always been pretty comfortable in talking and putting on a show in a way. And, you know, I think a lot of Starbucks people came through the Tazo office. And, you know, at the time, I mean, one of my jobs was to put on this T101. It was called the Trip to Origin presentation, right? Where we cupped out the line and a bunch of different materials from different countries and talked about terroir and character and this and that. And, you know, to me, in the earlier days, it was, you know, there was a passion there, but it was also a play. And it was, you know, I had done it, probably did that 1 hour, which always took 2 hours presentation. I probably did that 600 times, right? And so it was just kind of, I think experience is where you get comfortable doing these kind of things, is the short answer.
Love that story. Well, hey, this is an experiential event, an hour, so you've got some tea in front of you there. So I'd love to know what you're drinking there and what you brewed up prior to us launching this Zoom.
Yeah, well, I'm drinking Best Coast breakfast. Like I said, I needed a cup of tea. This was the first tea that we made after building this space, and we actually started making this tea kind of while we were building it. which is why it is kind of loosely inspired a little bit by the kind of pioneering West Coast, you know, Oregon Trail kind of feel. You know, when you try to create something, a variant, yeah, that's Coast Breakfast. Thanks, Doug, for the plug. When you try to create something that, like a breakfast blend, right? That it's trickier to make something that is rooted in some tradition and has some consumer understanding behind it than something brand new, right? For a breakfast blend, I wanted my product to, I was, you know, trying to make something that would feel more at home with a younger audience, something that I thought related a little bit more to what I was seeing in the third wave coffee. You know, and just like coffee roasts have gotten, you know, have went from being very dark to lighter and lighter and more flavor of, you know, more nutty and flavorful experiences, a little less acid and a little less roast on the tongue. You know, I wanted the breakfast blend to be astringent, but to not have as much minerality and bite. You know, and when I looked at what people were drinking, it seemed like trying to create something that had the dryness, but yet was smooth and silky on the tongue, is what I was going after. So it's a blend of a SAM, which nearly every breakfast blend is, you know, and people in the trade, we kind of joke, everybody has a SAM in it. It's just a matter of whether you put a lot in or whether you just wave the SAM bag over the blend before you pack it. But it's a second flush of SAM from a beautiful estate, harvested at its peak and prime, and you know, in the month of June. Blend with a Kenyan tea. And African tea is actually something I came about or started tasting a lot at Tazo. We purchased some to go into the chai concentrates and such. And there's a few gardens there on the east side of the Rift Valley that I really liked. But the problem with the Kenyan tea is that it's kind of green. It's got a coarseness about it and almost croppiness about it. And I wanted to soften that down. Again, I was going for something a little bit silkier. And so after a bunch of trial and error, we found out that putting it in a barrel, right, would the carbon from the outsides of the barrel seem to soften that greener bite. So what we ended up doing, long story short, is we built cedar chests, like little small coffins, and then we flamed the inside and torched it to, you know, carbonize it and to purify it, and then we rested the Kenyan tea in those boxes for 3 to 4 months before blending it with the to the final, you know, beverage. And then a very, you know, large helping of Yunnan, you know, brings this kind of rose florality to it that gives it a really nice clean finish.
Yeah, it's really delicious, and really love it. And I love the description, smooth, rich, aromatic, and pioneering that you put on your packaging, which one of the participants tonight, Sandy Nelson, who's our designer for Green Apron and is on the screen there, she commented, such beautiful packaging, a pleasure to open. So great point, Sandy. It's absolutely gorgeous, the cartons that Tony has.
Thank you, Sandy.
Tony, you want to talk about that? Maybe that's a good segue to Sandstrom Design and your history with Steve Sandstrom and such a brilliant designer. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your relationship with Sandstrom and how this all came about.
Steve Smith and Steve Sandstrom were we're tied together ever since I met him. He's worked on every project I can think of going back to 1998. Every time I see him, I walk, you know, at times, here's what I told him today in a birthday card, actually. I told him that every once in a while I feel like a designer, and then I hang around you, and then I feel like I'm not a designer anymore, you know? I mean, he's just one of those guys that he makes everything a little bit cooler, and he just has a wonderful sense for space and scope and presence and line and curve and detail and all of that. And so when we started off, I humored the idea of not working with Steve because I wanted it to be different, and I didn't want it to feel like Tazo or Smith Teamaker. And Steve has a style. There is a style that you can tell of Steve Sandstrom's, right? But you know, if it's a family business and Steve Sandstrom is kind of family at this point, it just felt right, you know? And so I called him, and I'll let you laugh at me. I spent 3 months trying to write a simple creative brief. I've never written a creative brief before. And I sat down, and he's like, well, just tell me what you want your tea company to be, like in a paragraph. You know how hard that is? I wrote 17 creative briefs, 20 creative briefs, never sent him a single one. And I finally, after a while, realized that, you know, time was slipping through my fingers. And I'm like, I sent him one with this huge caveat saying, I really don't know what I'm doing here. I don't like trying to describe stuff in copy. Can we talk about this? And like an hour later, I got the proof for the logo and everything. So he had been working on it long before he ever got my creative brief anyway. And the first time I saw the logo, I was like, I love it. I love it. I love it. So we just kind of ran with it. And then the box itself was inspired actually kind of by a box of cookies, really. But then the more I looked at the cookies, the more I realized that what this is doing is it's giving me what I have in the tasting room. It's giving me a tray that I can weigh my tea out in, blah, 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 right? So when you open it up, you get a bag, you get a clip, you get a little card, because I think tea is really about getting shit done. So there's a little things to do card that are included in each box. But you can set this on your scale if you're the type like me that is precise like that. You can weigh it out exactly, dump it into your pot, and you're on the go, right? And then if you don't, you can always just use a tablespoon as well. But that was kind of where the idea of doing a tray and a sleeve came around. And then it also afforded me, you know, I kind of wanted to do a tin, but I wanted this to be produced close by. I wanted to be able to manufacture it here at my property. I didn't want to have 8 pallets of empty tins to store somewhere. And so these come flat. They're printed up at a place that's literally 22 minutes up the street. They're delivered to me, and then we erect them per order before we ship everything out. So from a business and economic sense, it worked out really well.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful and so functional too. They stack really well. So different types of channels and different types of restaurants, you know, if you ever go to specialty grocery, those types of environments, you can display them really well. I love your personal messages. Tony wrote a little personal message on mine. 3 Best Coast, 3 mint. Hope you enjoy. Welcome home from vacation, Tony. So great way to personalize it as well. There's lots of great questions and comments coming in on the chat room. And I see, Robin, thanks for answering Jessica's comment and question in Shanghai. You can buy them on Tony's website, all of this tea. And he's giving a 30% discount to Green Apron Alliance members for the next 4 weeks. So from 4 weeks from today, you get a 30% off. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but just go onto his website. There's a discount code we'll give you, and then he'll ship out your tea. So thank you in advance, Tony, for all the graciousness of that discount.
No, my pleasure.
Robin wanted to jump back to a question when you were talking about Best Coast breakfast, and you mentioned second flush. And she said, can you ask him what the flavor profile difference is between the first flush and the second flush?
Yeah. And it's, you know, like anything, it's like describing wine or coffee or anything. There's always, you know, it's a rule of thumb because there's always variants that happen from season to season. But generally speaking, the first flush is of a Sam. It's brassy, coppery, penny-like almost. Imagine putting a penny in your mouth a little bit. It's a little bit more like that. It's not as rich. It's not as bready. It's not as malty. It doesn't have as much astringency. It has a little bit more of that kind of bite and minerality, similar to what you can get out of Sri Lanka. I mean, it doesn't taste like Sri Lanka, but it's similar in that it has that kind of bite. It's overall speaking, it's just not as refined. It's a little rougher in the mouth. And, you know, I think if you had them side by side, you know, in a paper cup without thinking about it, you might not see the difference. But if you're really looking for it, it's there. And it's one of those things that it commands the market. You know, when you look at the average price per kilo that's sold, there's just no denying that second flush is preferred by just about everybody. And we all kind of fight after that product when it comes on the market.
Excellent. Thanks, Tony. Jessica Gleason in Shanghai. She wants everyone to know she's drinking Tony's career path right now. She's got Tazo chai and Stephen Smith peppermint tea, number 45, in front of her there on the screen. So she's going back to your journey and toasting you with some of the two brands before, Tony.
Yeah, you're sweet, Jessica. I've had I've been lucky. I've worked with some of the best. At Starbucks, there's, people outside the tea, even just in quality assurance, marketing, even in legal. There's a couple people I really enjoyed. So that sounded like I don't enjoy lawyers. I didn't mean that, but I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing people. In the world of tea, I came into the industry at an amazing time because I had Steve right there most of my career. That's something that a lot of people would wish they would have. But I also had the John Snells and Peter Scanritz and Joe Simranis and a number of people that I'm not going to remember right now. But that was about the same time. Me coming into the industry was about 5 to 6 years before a lot of that generation was starting to retire. And I miss that older generation. For sure. But I got the pleasure of working with a lot of them. Why that comment comes up, after you holding up the mint, is the Pacific Northwest peppermint is delicious. And, I think that is what brought Steve into the industry. That's what brought Steve Lee and Steve Smith and Dave Leger together during the Stash years. And, what kind of drug them out of maybe the hippie space and into natural foods in a way. And, as I kind of commented earlier, I'm getting older where I'm starting to, kind of think about things a little bit more deeply, but it seems like peppermint keeps coming back around in my life. National Mint, which is the other one that we were offering. This one was developed with kind of that memory in mind, is when talking to the old cats of the world of mint tea, they were mentioning how, in certain fields at certain times in certain years, they would get this roasted element out of the peppermint. And that's what really kind of inspired me to lean towards grain. And I started off with a number of different grains before going to buckwheat, which of course isn't a grain, but has that roasted toastiness about it, which I think complements that mint experience so much.
Yeah, the mint's amazing. And I texted you last week on my family vacation driving through Eastern Oregon, and I think I saw some of the mint fields there around north of Sisters and Bend. But I remember Steve in the tea room talking a lot about Oregon peppermint, and I never knew until he mentioned it that it was so famous. It's great to have something so local there, so close to your tea kitchen.
Yeah, totally. And 3 or 4 hour drive, you're in the middle of it, and and the farmers out there, it's just, I think it's baked in how I was raised, I guess.
That's great. So Jessica's question is, she's enjoying her Tazo chai and Stephen Smith peppermint. What is the one thing you would want to change about the tea industry if you were able to wave a wand?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. So one of the reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing is that I don't know exactly how to express this well, but when I was right before we launched, and as I was trying to define, how am I going to be different, right? What's going to be different about Tellin Co? And difference is a big deal for me. I need to be different, and that's why I think those around me know the hardest thing for me to ever do is the same thing twice. I have to do something different. And I think there was a photographer once that says, like, be different or die. I think it was a photographer, but somebody in the artist realm said that once, and I've always kind of latched onto that. When I look at the world of tea in the United States, it's a mix of large brands with a lot of power behind them that may or may not have a lot of passion for the tea. They might just have a passion for a market and a business capability. And then I also see a lot of artisan craft, small batch, however you want to, define it, but a lot of regional, small, little, tea brands or tea companies. And to me, it feels like they're all using the same approach. They're all communicating the same thing. They're all taking photographs the same way. They're all latching on to similar trends. They're all doing the same thing. Most of it kind of is who is Elaine's boss in Seinfeld? It's that guy, Peterman. It's like his marketing strategy, right? Is I found this crazy, weird garden in, this remote place, and I brought this small little batch of this super rare experience for you. And I just think there's a lot of room there to expand on, because I've been in the industry long enough to know that it does matter where you're buying the tea. It does matter how it's grown. There's significant artistry and science that goes on at the garden, and that has to be respected and appreciated. But there's also the same amount of, artistry and craft that's going on at the packing level and at the blending level and at the, and we as an industry, we share a supply chain. The gardens that I'm buying from are gardens that Smith Tea Maker up the street is trying to buy from. Everybody's trying to buy from. And, so how can you differentiate yourself? How can I go out and say my second flush Darjeeling, if I'm just packing a single origin varietal, how do I say my to that? Because I put it in a bag that was smaller than the bag it came in? That didn't feel right, right? So hey, you guys are all in, we've all been in the world of coffee. The one thing I've always dreamed about, or the thing that I've always, wanted that coffee has, is this process where they can put your DNA. You have a roast curve, you have a thing. I imported this bean and then I did something to it to make it into this product, right? And so when starting Tellin Co, I really wanted to emphasize on the make. I wanted to be able to do stuff that differentiated me, that differentiated what I was offering, and allowed me to, that allows me to be more transparent about what I'm doing, because it's not easy to replicate. It allows me to talk about it in a slightly different way. And so I think back to the original question, sorry for the long response, is that, I want the industry to start maybe looking at it. I think there's a lot of people that are very small and they have a lot of capability because they're small. And you guys are all Starbucks veterans. You know how hard it is to move a ship that's that big. And, I think when I meet people, there's a sister act out of Texas somewhere that has a little tea company. And when I met them at the World Tea Expo, we were talking about this, and I was like, well, why are you going about this? And they were like, well, that's how it's done. I mean, look, at Starbucks does it, this does it. And I'm like, well, but you have the capability being so small that you can do it very differently, right? So I want the industry to feel more artisanal. I want the industry to feel more like, that this is what I'm doing, not just here's a picture of it growing 8,000 miles away and you can buy it on my website.
That's great, Tony. Along the lines of that, being different, Marie Gill, our founder and executive director, asks, how do you name the teas? Your teas are named with such creative names. So how do you get the inspiration for all these great names?
The name always comes first. I hate to say it. It sounds kind of cheesy, but it does in most, or it often comes just at the same time. I don't know the answer. They just, a short list is developed and then you live with it for a while and you choose the one that feels the best, right? Best Coast Breakfast, it had a nice rhyme to it. It feels kind of cool. I wanted it to be West Coast. And, again, back to that pioneering spirit, in a way, just felt appropriate. National Mint, was mint. What other words play off of mint? Currency, exchange, that kind of thing. And so National Mint just kind of more felt right. But, I don't know if there's like a calculation necessarily. We're launching, this year, we're going to launch Teas by Profession. And here it was supposed to launch today because I failed on some photography work and I need to redo some of my stuff. It hopefully will be tomorrow, but the first tea that's going to launch is called Designer, and it's made for folks that design, for folks that focus on the small details every day. And it's, I think, why did I bring that up? Because I think under the Profession series, it's a little bit more difficult than if you hadn't put a title around it. But to me, the names are what brings you into the feeling, and that's what you're really trying to create, is a feeling, not a flavor, but a feeling. What is it? What is National Mint? What is the flavor profile intended to make you feel like? And that's, where I think the name and the product have to work together.
Awesome.
Does that make any sense? Sorry, I feel like
that makes great sense. Great answers for that question. Tony, can you talk a bit about that? Because you graciously offered to give a discount to Green Apron members on that designer tea that you're launching in the next days. So can you talk a little bit more about that? I know some people on the screen here are probably going to grab that at a discount on your website as soon as you launch it. And And what's the inspiration behind that series and that particular tea that you're launching?
Well, when I look at professions, why we landed on that idea was, you know, as a small business, we wear a lot of hats. Some of them fit well, some of them don't. You should see my accounting, you know, hat. It's horrible. But it got me thinking of professions. Like, you know, we often kind of define ourselves by what our job is. And, you know, that doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense. But maybe you could define what somebody should drink by their job in a way. And so I started looking at functional things. And, you know, I should also say, you know, one of the cornerstones to what we're doing is consulting with other bigger companies. And we develop flavor profiles and some marketing content and stuff for other companies. And we were on a mission a couple months ago where we were developing teas for this functional line for a more functional driven tea company. And so my head was in functional, you know, and so functional, diuretic teas and, you know, help your bowel movement teas and things like that, right? And that's obviously not me. But functional, right, was like, okay, so function, what would a designer need for function? And we have one on this call right here, right? So I'm thinking designers, they need something for eyesight because their eyes are always, you're always poring over, you know, small little print and details and things of that nature. You're always focusing your eyes on small things. So every ingredient has to be kind of in this eyesight realm. And then cognitive performance, right, is helping to think fast underfoot, helping you to be creative in these type of situations. Beyond that, what does the designer want? Something warm, rich, flavorful, but not too acidic, not too tannic, something that would be okay if they poured it and then walked away for half an hour and came back and it was tepid. You know, I think most creative types, including designers, are the types where, you know, when an idea hits, everything else gets pushed away, right? So if you just made your pot of tea, it doesn't matter if you just got an idea on how you're going to solve this design problem. So we wanted something that was smooth, kind of elegant, but on the more of the indulgent side. Something that would be familiar but yet exotic and intriguing. And so we ended up making a blend that is mostly, or it's half of it is hojicha. It's a roasted green tea out of Japan that by itself has a, some people define it as caramel-like. It's got a, you know, it's a roasted tea. There was a website I was looking at a week ago that said it was the tea for coffee drinkers, which I think is a really piss poor way to define it. But it does have a roasted element to it, and it has a little bit of this caramel-like sensation. So we blended that, but to me, hojicha was a little light on the tongue, and it was underwhelming. Like, it was okay if you were, I don't know, if it was in the right mood with cuisine and stuff, but just as a standalone tea, it needed something to give it a little bit more structure and a little bit more support. And so we blended it with a really nice Maofeng out of China. And then we blended it with cacao to take that caramel and give it a little bit more richness and kind of push it a little bit more towards the chocolate realm. And then we scented it with saffron, because saffron has this, you know, beautiful aromatic properties. And I don't know if you've had a bar of like saffron chocolate, but that combination is quite lovely, I think. So in the end, it is and so the hojicha has a light amount of caffeine. So what we got was a dark cup that was, you know, had a little bit more intensity and a little bit more strength in the cup. There was some beautiful roasted elements that kind of leaned you towards this kind of indulgent side, but without it being a chocolate kind of play. And then this bright, nice saffron finish that left you with this really intriguing flavor in your mouth.
All right, it sounds absolutely delicious. And please make sure, Tony, and go onto the Green Apron Alliance platform the day it's available on your website and make a post on the platform so we're all aware. And I look forward to making my purchase there. It sounds absolutely delicious. Flavia, who's another designer. Sandy's one of our designers, and then we've got Flavia from Berkeley. She's on the screen there. Flavia wants to know what you see in the future of tea beverages.
Well, I hope that the future of the tea beverage is more and more transparency around what's inside it, more and more authentic brewing instead of relying on technology in a way. I think most of the innovation that I've seen in the space seems to be in packaging. how to brew it in a retail level using a bunch of gizmos and contraptions, and also, you know, I think from that point it's just kind of trend driven. Turmeric is hot right now, oolong is hot right now, that kind of thing. And what I'd like to see at the cafe level, in particular, if the pandemic allows us to regain a cafe industry, is, you know, to see teas being, you know, to see teas being made in a more natural way. What I like about coffee, I don't know, you probably can't see it right now. For the last 4 or 5 months, we've had an espresso machine in our tea tasting room. And we've been challenging, how can we make a chai latte without it coming from a concentrate? That's something that I think we've got a pretty good landing spot on that. But I think there's no reason why tea can't be ground to order, put in a portafilter, an espresso shot, pulled from it, and mixed with dairy. Why is it that tea has to be acidified and have a buttload of sugar in it in a PET 66-ounce gallon jug, right? And so when you make a chai latte that way, you're steaming the things together, you're getting this, you don't have any latte art, you don't have any theater, you don't have any, and there's nothing special about it. I'd like to see more theater at the cafe level from the tea industry. And I think finding ways to do that in a more natural way, to me, is, I think, the more exciting route. It's the harder route, but the more exciting one.
Yeah, love that. It seems like coffee houses have gotten a lot more theater the last 5+ years, but tea is ready for that. So I'll be first in line for your tea house when you do that, Tony, and have that chai. Adam Sachs is on the Zoom, and Adam, it's great to see your face. And I know we connected a few months ago, and I think you and Tony connected after we spoke. But Adam's definitely a tea expert in the industry, and he wants to know, is it cacao peel or cacao beans on your designer tea that you talked about, and how soon will it be available?
It's the cacao shell, Adam, and this particular one's from Peru, and it is going to be available as soon as I can take a decent product shot of the box and put it up on the web. How's that? I'm not a photographer, guys, and that is the hardest part of what I've been doing lately, is trying to learn that skill. And sometimes I can, you know, anybody can take 500 shots and one of them will look pretty decent. And that's where I'm at right now in my world. But when you add, and for you designers out there, you'll love this, because I did not know this until I started trying, and you all know this already, but a cello bag is really hard to shoot a picture of because light and flash and everything else bounce all off of it, right? So when I launched my website, I had a little kind of corner set up where I could control light and do this. And then I moved on, and now I'm trying to relearn that right now. And last night was supposed to be an easy night, and it ended up being complete failure with 300 photos that don't look that great. So,
hey, Tony, I'm one of your Instagram followers, so I don't think you give yourself enough credit when it comes to your photography. It's really creative, and I love the authenticity that you bring of your personality and your style to your social media. So I think you take really good pictures.
Well, thank you.
Back to the
next couple of days, though.
Next couple of days, awesome. Yeah. Back to the theater. Jessica Gleason wants to know, besides some of the things you've talked about with chai and whatnot, what's next in the theater of tea and cafes? I mean, you were famous for your draft teas that you did at Smith Tea Maker, the chai and the strawberry and all that, Tony. So you've obviously got a great eye for theater in cafes. What's next?
Well, I think there's still a lot of room in that space, for sure. And I think there's a lot of innovation that can continue to happen in that space. I mean, to me right now, and this might just be the kind of person I am, where if I can't really see B until I've gotten to A. And right now, I think for cafes, the biggest opportunity is to try and find a way to deliver tea in a fast and sexy way. And I think speed of delivery is super important, right? And I don't think tea will continue to increase as it is right now in the cafe environment. but it won't ever get close to coffee unless we can increase the speed. Consumers just don't have the time for that. And so I think, and there's also an environmental aspect about, you know, being able to do something, you know, there versus shipping containers of water and sugar everywhere. But I still come back to, I think if a lot of emphasis was put on how can we make tea espressos work well, you know, for both the cafe and the flavor profile. I mean, I think that's the route to go. Why is matcha latte so popular? It is good. It is good, without a doubt. And a matcha latte is a heavenly thing when done right. But it's the only tea latte that allows you to do latte art, right? It's the only tea latte that allows you to do something that's Instagrammable in a very, very cool way, right? And I think, to me, I think, you know, being able to do a chai or a black tea or a hoji cha or all these other things in a cafe environment in that kind of way would be super cool and super sexy.
Yeah. Excellent. Hey, Tony, winding down, about 3 minutes to 6 here, but a couple more questions for you. You know, you're a relationship guy. I know that because I know a lot of the people that you collaborate with in Portland. So I'd just love to know how this great innovation and collaboration that Portland's famous for, I'd love to know some of your proudest moments of collaborations you've done with the Han Oaks or with Chef Gregory or different things you've done over the years. So could you talk a little bit about some things you're really proud of that in terms of other artisan collaborations in Portland that you've done?
Sure. You know, the Vitaly Paley, the Russian caravan, we called it Georgian caravan. That was one of my favorite projects ever. And I think it's just because of the person, not the product. And it was also because we had one problem after another, and 3 to 4 days before we were due to launch, we added a whole nother product to the whole product line, right? And there's something about the mentality that Vitaly brought to the table. And when you work with somebody that, I mean, we've all had a boss, right, that demands a lot from you, but is kind of, in some way, it doesn't come across positive. Then you meet this person that demands a lot of you. Sorry about that. But it inspires you instead of kind of dragging you down, you know? And Vitaly's one of those people that, you know, when we met and he was telling me about how, like, in Georgia, we would take this tea and we'd mix it with a blueberry jam, you know? And I'm sitting there like, God, that's heavenly. And I remember we were both like, shit, we got to make blueberry jam now, don't we? And, you know, blueberry jam is so far out of my world, and, you know, that it felt very risky. But there's a great feeling of walking out on a limb until you kind of hear it crack and then trying to walk out a bit further. And so my favorite memory is Vitaly, for sure, because he was inspiring in his demanding nature of going further and further and further.
Yeah, love that. Congratulations on that collaboration, and all the creative things you do with all those makers there in Portland and elsewhere is really impressive. So my last question as we start to wrap up here tonight, what are your aspirations for your company? It's 2 years old, and you've built this amazing tea kitchen, and you've got these delicious teas you're making, and, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so you're finding new ways to reach your customers on your website and other things. And what is a Tellin company 5 or 10 years from now?
That is the billion-dollar question, right? I started this off by saying I did what everybody did, and I went around and talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs and people with, you know, experience on starting something. And, you know, the thing that they always ask me is how are you going to change the world, or how is your product going to change the world, or in these big statements. And I remember always being like frustrated because the only answer I had to what do you plan on doing was, I want to make tea. And they'd be like, okay, well, but you know what? And you know, maybe another way, here's what I can tell you, Doug. I don't know where I'm going to be in 4 or 5 years. Here's what I hope, though. At the end of the day, I don't care to be the biggest or the most powerful or whatever. I want to be the coolest. I want to be somebody that, you know, that takes on unusual projects and assignments. Do you guys ever, are any Futurama fans here? I always wanted to be the tea equivalent of the professor in Futurama. That like every day there's something new, and it's like, good news, we're gonna make a blueberry tea. That's what I wanted to be, right? And then I dive in, and then the whole day that's all I'm doing. So what can I say? I want to be, you know, I want to make something new and refreshing and cool. And I want to continue doing that and have as much fun as I can. And beyond that, I think, you know, from a business perspective, I hope to be in city proper, close to my kids' school, so that they can ride their bikes there after school and we can kind of stay tight and at home. And beyond that, I just want to have fun.
Awesome.
Not a great answer, I'm sure, you know, but that's the reality of it right now.
No, it's a great answer. And I think you're well on your way to doing all the above. So congratulations. Well, wrapping up here, you guys, I know we could probably talk for another hour and drink some more tea. And it's been a really great night. Tony, we can't thank you enough for joining us. And we're just honored that you've been a part of our Inspired Stories from the Kitchen series. So thank you so much. I know you're a new member to the Green Apron Alliance, and in your business is a business partner with the organization. So thank you for that. And we hope you stay involved. And we've got some other really cool things coming down the pipeline with the organization that I know that you're going to want to get involved with. So we look forward to that.
Well, I appreciate everybody. If there's anything I could ever do for any of you guys, just reach out, please.
We will. And one more thing here, just wanted to call out again that Tony's generously offered to extend a 30% discount on 3 teas, on the Best Coast Breakfast, the National Mint, and the designer teas that he'll be launching in the next few days. So go to tellin.com to place your order. And under the discount code space, just put in Shaman's Apprentice. Shaman's Apprentice, and then that'll get your discount. And then just a note on that, if you order at least $40 in tea, the shipping is free. So stock up. It's a good time to be stocking the cupboards. Just looking ahead, we hope you've all enjoyed tonight the second edition of Inspired Stories from the Kitchen. We're really excited to have an all-star lineup of Starbucks alumni who are cooking up some great products, brands, and companies. We'll be announcing the next 2 Starbucks alumni that will be featured in the series on the Green Apron Alliance platform soon. So keep your eyes on the Green Apron Alliance platform. And just wanted to say again, thank you, Tony, for giving us so much of your time and sharing your inspiring journey with us all. And thanks to everyone for joining us. And please stay safe and healthy out there.
Exactly. Well said. Thank you.
See you guys. Take care. Bye.